All right, something I've had on my want list for quite a while now is a set of Soliloquy 5.2 speakers. These were made by Carry Audio, Dennis had, and then they kind of spun off into this Soliloquy brand. And you know, you can see out here, if you do a search for them, they got some amazing reviews back in the day. And let's see, US Audio Mart, somebody's got a set here, or did have a set for 1,800 bucks they sold. Super nice speakers, just highly revered in the industry, really good with tube gear. And you see here, Six Moons did a feature on AES in 2003, and you can see down here at the bottom, they this is a set of those. I can see a carry amplifier down here with them, but looks like you know, these things were pretty expensive. They were this set in this configuration was about 6,000 bucks for a set back then. And I've wanted a set for a while. I've had a saved eBay search for a long time. They pop up every once in a while, typically out on the West Coast for whatever reason. And they're pretty expensive, you know, $2,000-ish or more when they pop up. And then you got these things are not light; they're very, very heavy speakers. So then you have another 100, 200 bucks in shipping them, and the risk of that. So I've just never found a set locally. And a guy I know up in the Durham area, RTP area, he's got a set of them, and pretty amazing speakers, but. I happened to see a set of them pop up here recently for sale by the same guy that has a set up in the Durham area, and he kind of listed them as Soliloquy prototypes. And so I took a ride to Raleigh a week or so ago. I was going to see my daughter, and I swung by his place and checked out these speakers. So the story I got from this guy, his name's Josh, was that another kind of audio flipper out there had bought out a storage locker, and the storage locker was full of woodworking tools, and in that storage locker was this set of speakers. I admit the cabinets are a little rough. They got scratches on them. They're kind of painted almost a grayish green color. And as you can see, the plates on the back don't match exactly. One of them's black, one of them's kind of a gray. And ultimately, you know, these things are extremely heavy. I think they're about 70 pounds a piece. That's all I could do to carry one of them, much less attempt two. And but got them loaded up, got them home. You know, I got them at what I thought was a really fair price for these. Got them home and took some pictures, and I sent an email to Dennis this week. Dennis had, who was the founder and owner of Carry Audio for many years, and I asked Dennis, I said, hey, are these, would these happen to be Soliloquy prototype speakers? And he kind of responded back and said, yep, that's what they look like. So I'm glad to have put these in my collection. When we get the audio listening room built, these will certainly be a part of it. I might try to do some veneer. I thought about doing a walnut veneer on these cabinets and making them look beautiful again. But anyway, I just thought I would share. It was a pretty cool story, and I had a lot of fun. And to end up with some type of prototype, I just thought it was pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to pull Mr. Carlson and lean back in my seat here and get relaxed. I recommend you do the same. Go grab some popcorn, a drink, some beer, whatever. Help you relax. This is probably a 10 or 15 minute topic. It's one of those soapbox things I've got on my mind, and I wanted to share with you. So I'm working on this video right now entitled How to Find and Keep a Good Electronics Technician, or amp tech, whatever you want to call them. And you know, as I've been pondering it, driving to and from work every day, what all I wanted to say in that video, this topic kept coming up, but I kept thinking, well, no, I don't want to burden down the one video with this topic, but it's very related. So it might be more of a question of, you know, what makes a good amp tech or electronics technician. So I kind of spun down this path here of book knowledge, i.e. formal education, versus practical experience, and how both play out here. So I got a couple stories I thought I would tell that would, on both ends of that spectrum, that would help bring some relevance to it, and we'll just kind of see how that goes and bring it all back together here at the end. I once had a college professor tell me, he said, there's really three levels of understanding. Okay, the first level is that you kind of understand something and you grasp the concepts of it. Okay. The second level is then that you can then take that knowledge that you have learned and grasped, and you can apply it and use it, and actually do something with it. And then the third level of understanding is that you could then teach someone else how to both understand it as well as apply it. And I don't proclaim to be this this wonderful teacher up here at the top. I'm just a guy that knows the bottom two rungs pretty well, and I'm trying to share them with you here on YouTube. So I think that'll play out a little bit as we get into this conversation. So my first story. On a Saturday, my phone rings. I pick it up. This guy I used to work with says, "Hey, Mark, I got a problem. My son's in a electrical engineering program, and we're working on a project this weekend, and he has ran out of resistors. He's having to breadboard something, and we need some 1K resistors." And I said, "Well, sure." And he was saying how they had tried Radio Shack, but there's none open anymore. They were looking at Amazon to see if they could get some overnighted on a Saturday to be here on a Sunday. That wasn't working out. And I said, "Come on over." So him and his son came to the house. Well, his son is in one of the better universities here in the state. It's a nationwide renowned electrical engineering program. I'm guessing there's probably a couple hundred kids in this program, and this guy is valedictorian. He's top of the top, okay? And he's a senior working on a project. So he comes over and we pull out the bins, and I've got quarter-watt resistors, half-watt resistors, 1-watt resistors, 3-watt resistors, and I'm like, "Okay, what do you need here?" And he said, "Well, those look about the size of what I've been using." And I said, "Well, those are half-watt resistors." I said, "Do you understand the wattage and what that means?" And he says, "Yeah, I think that's the amount of power that one of these resistors can withstand." I said, "Well, in a practical world, it's really how much heat these things can dissipate, power that gets turned into heat before they burn up." And he said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But he had never actually seen all these different resistor sizes and how that played out. And he was like, "Wow, this 3-watt are much bigger than the quarter watts." And I'm like, "Yep, because they need to be able to dissipate more heat." And so, that was my first little inkling that he had not done a lot with physical stuff along the way, right? His next question, though, is the one that threw me for a loop. I handed him the half-watt resistors, and he's looking at them, and he said, "The leads on these, the length of these seem to be a good bit longer than what I've been using." He's like, "If I was to cut the leads off, would it affect the resistor value?" And I'm just like blown away at that point. I'm like, "You understand the little piece in the middle here, whether it's carbon composite or however it's made, that is your metal film, whatever, that is your resistor. These leads, they're just, some type of metal that's connected to it, so you can actually attach this within your circuit or have something to solder to." I said, "They have no bearing, no effect whatsoever on the resistance." But he had never had any practical experience at all. We walk in here to the bench, okay? He starts looking around, asking me questions about what all this stuff is up here on my bench. And, he had used an oscilloscope before, but never a physical one. The one he had used was some software on his laptop, right? So he was actually pushing buttons on my oscilloscope, and I was showing him what it did, He was like, "This is pretty cool." Then we get to the soldering iron, okay? We start talking about the soldering iron. And he's like, "Man, one day I'd love to come over and have you teach me how to solder." And I said, "I'd be glad to teach you how to solder." He says, "I've never touched one." Okay, I'm getting my second shock at this point. 4-year degree program, senior, valedictorian, never soldered in his life. And, you know, I started playing back my history. So I started out in a 2-year community college, got a degree in electrical engineering, and man, we did, that is all we did. We soldered stuff, we built stuff, we blew stuff up. It was a 2-year fun exercise in craziness, but I learned a ton during that time, okay? I then transferred, when I graduated, I transferred out of that into a university 4-year program. And I flashback, I remember now, I didn't do anything with my hands during that. At that point in time, we were using a circuit simulation tool called PSpice. It was running on an old IBM PC, probably AT or XT 8088 processor in it. So you would click simulate on your circuit that you designed, and 2 or 3 hours later you would come back and there would be your results. And then you would say, "Oh, I got to print this out for the instructor," because there was no such thing as email back then. And so you click print, and an hour later this thing was done printing out on your dot matrix printer or whatever. And I got to thinking about it. I never did anything except for in labs and in simulations, not anything hands-on as it related to a 4-year degree program. And so, you know, it kind of brought me back around to, wow, these 2-year programs, if you're wanting to get into doing this stuff like I'm doing back here, much better bang for your buck out there than a 4-year program. I'm not saying if you're wanting to go be an electrical engineer working for an energy company that the 4-year degree wouldn't be a better route. I'm just saying that if you're interested in the stuff I make these videos about, 2-year degree would probably serve you pretty darn well. All right, so that's one end of the spectrum. Lots of book knowledge, little to no ability to do anything with their hands or practical or apply that knowledge in a real way to do anything with. Now, don't get me wrong. This kid's smart. He will probably go on to design circuits for somebody like, you know, Apple or Nokia or Cisco or somebody, where he'll design this stuff using a computer. It'll get passed off to, you know, some other company to actually build the thing. But as far as hands-on practical, you know, stuff like my channel's all about, none whatsoever. All right, so story number 2, the other side of the coin. I've got a friend, and he's on up there a little bit, probably 70-ish, and he has been repairing electronics for the better part, probably 40 years or so, maybe 50. Does a lot of antique radio stuff, does some RF stuff, some ham radio stuff and whatnot, as well as I've known him to work on some guitar amplifiers, things of that nature over time. And he's a pretty good tech. A lot of people take their stuff to him around here. And so, you know, he and I got to talking one day, and you know, he kind of mentioned he had a bunch of tubes, and you know me, I'm always looking for tubes. So I ended up over at his house one day. Okay, I'd ran into him many times at various events, just never had been to his house. So I get to his house, and he's showing me the tubes he would be interested in selling some of, and I'm kind of going through them. And at some point, you know, I said, "Hey, I wouldn't mind seeing your, you know, your workshop, you know, your bench or whatever, wherever you do your repair stuff at." And so he takes me over into this room, and over in the corner, the room's full of all kinds of just equipment and whatnot, like I guess parts and stuff. And over in the corner of this room, there's a small little table, maybe 3 foot by 4 foot, about the size of a card table or something. And sitting on top of it is a soldering iron and an old analog multimeter, like a Simpson multimeter or whatnot. And you know, I'm kind of looking at this, and you know, I wasn't wanting to be rude, but I was like, "So is that what you use to restore your stuff with?" And he was like, "Yep, that's my bench." And you know, I'm just kind of blown away. I'm looking at it. Now, certainly there's screwdrivers and pliers, things of that nature laying around. And I kind of look around. I said, "Do you use anything else?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got a tube tester." And he pointed to it. It was a little Hickok tube tester. And he said, "I also use a Variac." And he kind of pointed to his Variac that was there underneath his bench. And he said, "That's pretty much all I use." And it's one of those things where, I'm just kind of, so I get to talking to him. I'm kind of blown away because, this guy does a lot of repair work, and he's down to just two pieces of equipment, a soldering iron and a multimeter. And, I get to talking to him about it, and he said, I've really never used an oscilloscope, and I got to talking to him about formal education, and he said, I basically don't have any. He said, I used to do some antique radio restoration, as in the wood cabinets. He said, I did the wood, sanding, staining, kind of some of the woodwork. And he said, somewhere along the way, I got to replacing tubes, and then the next thing I know, I figured out how to replace capacitors. And he said, I just kind of went from there. And I said, so no formal education whatsoever. And he said, no. And I said, well, what about things like Ohm's law and KCL and KVL and power laws and whatnot? And he's like, yeah, I kind of get that stuff, but I don't. He was like, I don't. I've never studied it, and I don't really use it. And it kind of occurred to me, if you think about that hierarchy I was talking about of you got to comprehend something and understand it, and then you have to apply it and put it into action. Well, he had jumped straight to step number 2 and had learned how to do things via application, but never. He had totally skipped number 1, the first layer of learning. And it kind of made me think a little bit about myself and working on cars. So I've never had any formal training in auto mechanics whatsoever. Yet, if I go out there today and an alternator is dead in one of my vehicles, I'm going to AutoZone and I'm buying an alternator and I'm swapping mine out and I'm taking it back for the core charge. I can do that stuff because I'm mechanically inclined. But at the end of the day, I'm not the guy to design a combustion engine. I'm probably not the guy to, install a cam and time that. But some of the more basic stuff, change spark plugs, alternator, things of that nature, I'm perfectly fine with. So I kind of think that's how this guy had done what he had done. And we got to talking a little more, and he was good with this multimeter. He knew what voltages should be on the plates of tubes. He knew, that coupling caps were there to keep the voltage from getting from the plates of one tubes over to the the grids of the next tubes. He knew that if he saw any type of AC in his power supply beyond the rectifiers, that was bad. So he had kind of applied practical knowledge, but really never had the underlying kind of formal technical knowledge. And yet, he's survived and done well. I think it was a lot of trial and error. And so it's a lot of the YouTube watchers out there are probably in the same boat, just trying to figure out through these videos like myself and others make, how you can do some of this stuff without having to go back and get a degree. And I think there's a good chance you could do all you ever wanted to do without formal education in this. I'll tell you where it'll start to fall down and maybe fail you. And that would be if you wanted to get into designing circuits or modifying circuits. So, I bet you money, if going back to this gentleman, if I went back to his house and I kind of watched him work on a piece of equipment and I said, hey, I noticed you've got a low-pass filter there in that circuit. If you wanted to change the frequency response of that to kind of, allow more or less bass through this, what would you do to change what would you do here with the capacitor and resistor to change that? I don't, unless he had just practically done it over time, but I don't think the underlying theory would have been there for him to have done that. And that's what I'm talking about. It's one thing to notice that that's a 0.47 microfarad capacitor and it looks leaky, so I'm going to replace it with a 0.47 microfarad capacitor. It's another thing to say, what happens if I change that 0.47 microfarad capacitor to a 0.22 microfarad capacitor? What's that going to do to my frequency response of that circuit? So that's a little bit of what I'm talking about, where just this practical application might start to fail you without some of the theory behind it. Or if you want to sit down and design an amplifier from scratch, you know, one end to the other, it would be a little bit of a challenge. So, at any rate, you kind of get my point. There's two ends of this spectrum, and I'll tell you, I don't know that either one of them is the wrong end of the spectrum. I personally like the two roads to meet in the middle, have the underlying background and theory, and as well spend a lot of hours on your bench. You know, if I think back, I've got way more hours on the bench than I ever did in a classroom, and I've learned a lot more from the bench. So, you know, maybe this just practical way to go with maybe do a little reading along the way, watch some YouTube videos like we've been doing here, or you're doing right now. Maybe you'll pick up a little bit of the theory to kind of back it, and you can be a rock star technician there. Anyway, I had this on my mind. I just thought I would kind of get it off my chest. Wasn't so much of a rant as just some thoughts I had going on, and I wanted to talk them out a little bit with you guys. So give me your thoughts down below. Tell me, you know, what you've got background-wise, and some of your thoughts on what I've said here today. While I got you, just a couple quick updates on some other projects you'll be seeing videos on here soon. I've got both of these units electrically restored at this point. A lot of parts I'm sending back to the customer in the bag there. So stay tuned, a week or two out, maybe 3. You should see a video here on these pair of Leak TL50s. Where I'm spending most of my time on these TL50s are these covers. I've got the paint to match. The problem is right now it's glossy, and my the chassis on the Leaks is kind of a matte finish. So the color's right, the finish is not. So if you guys have got any tips on making paint less glossy, I've done some reading online a little bit about some powder you might could put in with it to bring down some of the sheen. But if you've got any thoughts there, shoot me an email, mw@blueglow.net. Love to get some tips on that, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Most people would probably put these in and it would be fine, but I'm trying to get them just perfect. Okay, the other good news this week is I've got finally a non-dented chassis that showed up. If you guys remember, I had one show up that was dented, and I ended up having to get another one from Antique Electronics Supply. They sent me another one, no charge, didn't even ask any questions, and they didn't even ask for the old one back. I've still got the dented one over here. Maybe we can do something with it, I don't know. We will see. Any rate, my goal today is to get all the parts back out of this one, and to get this chassis drilled to match this one, except for I'm going to get the things on the right side. That way, starting next weekend, I can start my video of the actual build of the inside. It'll probably take me 2 or 3 weeks to get that video done and get it posted for you, but stay tuned. I promise you it is in the works. Alright, I'm going to call that a wrap for this week. Thanks for watching these Soapbox Sundays. I'm having a lot of fun with them. Seems like I'm getting some good feedback on them, so we'll keep making them. Thanks again, everybody.